Breaking news, officials confirm that 3 Louisiana police chiefs, a city marshal, and a businessman, all indicted on federal charges including visa fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit visa fraud. We first told you of FBI and Homeland Security investigations operations in Forest Hill, Glenmore, and at the Crown Plaza Hotel in Baton Rouge. Investigators say these individuals conspired to obtain hundreds of special non-immigrant visas reserved for victims or witnesses of special crimes who assist law enforcement, known as U visas.
99.9% of law enforcement is good. There are occasional bad apples, and this is what happens.
It's a heartbreaking scenario for Rapides Parish Sheriff Mark Wood, as 2 of his parish's police chiefs were part of an operation that involved money laundering and citizenship visa fraud in Central and South Louisiana.
We are held to a higher standard, and you can't do this. You break the law, you will be held accountable, and this is what's happened in this case.
In total, Oakdale Police Chief Chad Doyle, Oakdale Ward 5 Marshal Michael Slaney, Forest Hill Police Chief Glenn Dixon, former Glenmore Police Chief Thibaut Onashe, and businessman Shakantrant Patel were all indicted on federal charges, including visa fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit visa fraud.
On July 2nd, a federal grand jury in Shreveport returned a 62-count indictment charging 5 individuals.
Prosecutors say Patel orchestrated the scheme by collecting payments from foreign nationals and coordinating with law enforcement in Louisiana to create fraudulent U visas, which are special non-immigrant visas reserved for victims or witnesses of serious crimes who assist law enforcement. The indictment lists more than 50 acts detailing how the police chiefs accused each filed false police reports to support U visa applications. These reports falsely claim that specific individuals were victims of armed robberies that prosecutors say never occurred. The fraudulent reports, signed by police officers, allowed the foreign nationals and their family members to remain in the United States under false pretenses.
In connection with these charges, these individuals were arrested yesterday by federal law enforcement agents, and agents executed search warrants at multiple locations throughout central and south central Louisiana.
Acting U.S. Attorney Alexander Van Hook says Patel allegedly offered to pay an officer with the Rapides Parish Sheriff's Office $5,000 to provide a fraudulent police report.
I want to note that at that point in the investigation, that Sheriff Wood from Rapides Parish and the Rapides Parish Sheriff's Department were assisting federal law enforcement in this investigation, and that fraudulent police report was never put to use.
The FBI and the majority of our law enforcement community is privileged to work on behalf of true crime victims every day. But in this case, people paid thousands of dollars to manufacture that status to get a shortcut to the privilege of staying in our great nation.
And Louisiana Attorney General Liz Murrill released a statement on this indictment. She says, quote, "My office was working with our federal partners prior to the federal arrest. We are now reviewing the evidence and expect additional state charges will follow. Public officials, especially those in law enforcement who are conspired to commit and obstruct justice, violate the public trust and undermine faith in justice. They will be held accountable." And currently, Patel is the only individual indicted that is currently in police custody. He's held at the Rapides Parish Detention Center in Alexandria. Prosecutors will try this case in the Alexandria Division of the Western District of Louisiana.